worries. So just for the recording, so I'm Thomas. I'm working for around about a year for the Cardano Foundation, and the implementation of Rosetta was actually my first project here at CF, and it was an interesting project, and I think it's running quite well right now, and that's why we think it's good to just spread the word about the application, about what we did, and that's what I'm trying, because most of the people, because I saw at community events, most of the people, they just roughly heard about Rosetta, because if you're in the Cardano ecosystem, then it could be quite probable that you don't use Rosetta, because you're able to use the Cardano CLI or just the other tools like, for example, the Blockchain stuff or the Python stuff. So there's a lot of Cardano specific implementations, and I think if you're from the ecosystem, then you will probably use this one. But we want to talk about Rosetta because it's mostly for the exchanges. Because Rosetta was initially developed by Coinbase, because if you think of a central exchange, they want to support as many blockchains as possible. So that's why they can't deal with specific implementations of the specific blockchains. This would kill them completely. So that's why Coinbase came with this idea to develop an API which is blockchain independent, and then just offer the So basically, it's something like forcing the blockchains to implement this API, because in the long term, it makes it easier for the central exchanges to support as many blockchains as possible. Because from their end, they just see the API from Coinbase, so the Rosetta API, and then they just implement it against this. So they implement their tooling against this API, and then they just replace the Docker containers on the other side. And then they are able, for example, to run Bitcoin, Ethereum, Cardano, or whatever, and then just replacing the container. But their whole toolkit is basically the same. And that makes it much faster and simpler for them to run it. And if the implementation of Rosetta is good, then it's also more reliable for them than just implementing the native stuff. So there's also an open source specification which you can check out. So they renamed it actually. So in the beginning it was called Rosetta, but now it's called Mesh. But yeah, you can just check it out. So I think we will share these slides at the end afterwards as well. But if we look into the API, so I just opened the Swagger documentations from this API. So it's mostly clustered in different building blocks. So we have this network stuff. These are the endpoints for returning general network information. So for example, what kind of available networks we have, what is the current status, and what kind of options does this Rosetta implementation really offer? So there you can ask it. For example, in the status, you also get the current block identifier. So if you're at the tip or not. Then we also have the block endpoint, where you get the detailed information about the specific blocks. You can query the latest block or query some transactions from the block. Then if it's implemented, then you can also get the mempool stuff. But in our implementation, mempool is not implemented because no one uses this, so that's why there wasn't the need to implement it. And then, yeah, for account, then there's also the account endpoints, because Coinbase came up with the idea to just generalize everything into like an account-based blockchain. So we needed to put in our UTXO models into this account stuff and to make it easier for them. And then besides the data API, we also have this construction API, where we are giving the exchanges all of the tools they need to build their transactions. So for example, derive addresses from public keys, build transactions, and put it together with metadata, or combine the raw transactions with signature, and also submitting transactions. In our case, for Rosetta Java, we are using the Submit API, so we are just forwarding the transaction to the submit API. Yeah, there's a question.
Yeah, exactly. Ruby's asking, what do they actually call accounts in our case?
Yeah, good question. So accounts is for them, it's just a single address. So they don't, in Rosetta, we don't have the concept of wallets. So it's always, when they're talking about accounts, it's always a single address. So and there we are returning the balance for the single address. But good question, thanks. Yeah, so that's why there was a need for building Rosetta. And there's also the question, why did we rebuild Rosetta? Because IOG implemented Rosetta in TypeScript, so in 2022. So it was a TypeScript implementation based on dbSync. And yeah, it was running at the exchanges for quite some time, but we saw the need to rebuild it with within the Java ecosystem and using our tools, because we saw the problems that, for example, using dbSync in the Rosetta space, it has a quite high resource consumption, because, for example, dbSync takes to resync. For example, dbSync takes for a complete resync, and on the mainnet it takes multiple days, because it is basically saving everything what is on chain. And since you saw the API from Rosetta, we don't need everything, so we just need a small portion of data, and that's why we don't need to store everything. And since space, so storage and time is money for the exchanges, and we wanted to make it cheaper for the exchanges to run and support Cardano. That's why we decided to move it to a better implementation. So that's why we decided to build it on Java. So this project started last year, I think in March, roundabout. So we are setting everything up on top of Yassi Store. And the mainnet sync times, there are less than a day. So it's because because Yassi Store. So I will have a slide for Yassi Store as well to market this as well. Because Yassi Store is a modular indexer, and there we are just indexing what we really need. But the API, on the API level for the exchanges, it's completely the same. So we're just replacing one container with another, and then they are running on the new Rosetta. Yeah, and they need to resync as well, because the databases aren't compatible. But yeah, so I've already started to tell you a little bit about Rosetta Java. So here you see a simplified architecture what we have in there. So the exchanges, they want to have it easier for them. Most of them want to have a single Docker container where all of the processes are running in. So I know this is not the original concept of Docker. So normally it's one process, one Docker container, but they want to have it as simple as possible. So that's why we are next to the Docker Compose deployment. We also offer all-in-one Docker container where everything is in there. And these are the components we have and we are using. So we are using having a Postgres database for storing everything. Then we have Yassi Store, which is indexing everything and saving it into the database. And also we have the Cardano node. So actually this architecture diagram is a little bit outdated, because the API is only reading from the database. And it's this arrow is just for submitting the transaction, and it's not directly to the node. It's submitting the transactions to the submit API, and this is how it works. So the API is just readings from the database. Yeah, Rosetta Java is completely open source, so you can check it out if you want, and I will share the link as well afterwards. And just a few words about Yassi Store. I think Satya, who is the main developer of Yassi Store, could talk hours about this project, and I will try to just name the most important points which I see for Rosetta. So Yassi Store is a modular indexer, which is open source as well in the Blockchain repository. And from my point of view, what's important is that it's scalable and performant, since it's modular. So you can there's this concept of stores. You can choose what kind of stores you want. So for example, the transaction store or UTXO store or account store. So you can just pick what you need, and then it's just indexing what you really need. And this makes it really great for our case, since, as I said, we don't need everything. And then also another great feature is it also supports directly the data pruning, because it's, for example, DB-Sync is storing all of the UTXOs, also when they are already spent in a transaction. So that's why they're not valid or for the exchanges anyway. And these stay in the database in DB-Sync. In Yassi Store, you can activate it with a flag to just start the pruning, and then Yassi Store is deleting all of the UTXOs which are used in a transaction. And that's why the exchanges can't use them anyway. So that's why this is another thing where you can just tune the performance and reduce the storage of Yassi Store. And also Yassi Store is less resource consuming as, for example, DB-Sync. So because of the reasons I already talked about. So this is my last slide, and we can jump into the repository. So I just want to share what we are planning. So because when I'm looking back in the history, so as I said, we started at the beginning of 2024 with the development. The release 1.0 was in September, and there we started the rollout to different exchanges. So far as I know, we have less than 10 exchanges who migrated to Yassi to Rosetta Java, but there will be more and more, and who are using this and migrating to Rosetta Java, because we are planning to deprecate the TypeScript Rosetta in the future. So we're not sure yet when to do it, but we will deprecate it in the future, and then stop the support for that. And what we want to do next is, so currently, for example, Mateusz, who's also on the call, started the implementation of the rewards into Rosetta Java, so that you can query the account balance for a stake address, and then you get the withdrawable rewards from this particular stake address. This wasn't there in Rosetta Java because it was missing in Yassi Store, but right now I'm quite happy when Mati is done with this feature. Then it's a huge advantage for this one. And then the last thing, what we want to do in the future is to integrate off-chain data into Rosetta, so that it's easier to work with native tokens. And so this is something what we need to really plan and discuss, because it will affect the Rosetta API a little bit, and we need to make some adjustments, and that's why we need to plan it accordingly and discuss it with also some users, so that it fits their needs as well. But we want to do it in the future, so this year hopefully as well. Any questions so far? What I missed? So I don't see anything in the chat. Because then I can just, if there's nothing, then I just continue. Yeah, there's a question, Matthias.
Well, it's maybe a bit specific to the reward, so maybe you don't know, but does that mean you've also implemented all the governance rules, since they directly now impact the rewards, unfortunately?
Yeah, the governance stuff is to do as well. So because we can query the governance actions, but you can't submit currently governance actions, because it's just a missing field in the construction API. If this answers your question.
I guess so. So the rewards are probably not working past the last hard fork, I suppose.
Matthias, are you referring to Yassi Store or to Rosetta Java?
Probably Yassi Store, on top of which Rosetta will get its rewards values, right?
Maybe that's as the latest news, but as far as I know, it's part of Yassi Store.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So
I'll
we get it. Yeah. We get it directly from Yassi Store. Yeah.
Okay. So thanks.
Yeah, no worry. So no problem. Okay. Yeah. So as I said, so this is the repository. So what's always super important is for the exchanges is that the README is pretty precise, because what they're mostly doing is they're just copying the start commands from here and starting it in their environments. So that's why it's important to have it over here. But as I said, we have different starting modes. We can start it as a single Docker container, or we can start it as a Docker Compose, which I prefer more, because having everything in one Docker container seems a little bit odd, but it's working for them, so it makes it easier for them as well. Besides that, what's most important is for this repository is that we have, so from my point of view, a quite good quality pipeline, because we're using, for example, Sonar Cloud for tracking code smells and checking our test coverage, and also this is also checking for known security issues in the code. And besides that, we also have integration tests, which are leveraging Yassi DevKit, which is also a product from Blockchain. So we are spinning up in our integration tests, we're spinning up a custom dev net, and then we are running everything against this test net with a Postman collection to ensure that everything works. Because bugs can be they can be quite critical here, because this could hinder an exchange to trade stuff. So that's why we need to be always 100% sure that everything works. And but regarding the repository, just check it out. If you have any question, or if anything is missing, then you can just drop us a message, and then we will add it. For example, we also have more information in the wiki here. So for example, the Cardano specific API additions, which is quite important, because sometimes the blockchain, which Rosetta is built on top of, has some specifics which can't be pushed directly into the API. So that's why it's okay to add blockchain-specific API additions. And we are just reporting them here on this wiki page to transparently show the exchanges how we are doing stuff, so what we adjusted to the original Rosetta API. And so actually that's it from Rosetta from my point of view. I have another point which I just want to highlight shortly, because we're currently working also on a CPS. It's about the Cardano open metadata schema, because as I said, so we are thinking about to integrate off-chain data into Rosetta and, for example, GraphQL as well, and into our tools. And we saw that there's a problem which makes it a little bit harder for example, new developers or DApp developers to really work with the off-chain data, because the different services mostly having different APIs, and this makes it easier, for example, to switch from one API to another, which is also leaving you in your application development a little bit centralized, because if you're starting, for example, to build everything on our token registry, then you're kind of locked in our token registry and can't move to another service when they are offering the same data. And that's why we are working on the Cardano problem statement for this open schema. So I don't want to read everything out here, but I will share this link as well to this repository. And if you have anything to add here, then happy to do a pull request, start an issue, or just drop us a message so that we can add it, because I think I'm nearly at the end of my time, and perhaps there are some other questions.